Good afternoon, everyone, and good morning to those of you that have joined from the States and Canada and abroad. So it's lovely to have you here today. We've got a great webinar. These are one of my favourites. I love doing these with CloudPay because the information is fantastic. But today's webinar is Global Payroll Efficiency Index 2023, how to improve your payroll performance. And I'm sure we're going to find out what are the hardest countries to process payrolls for. So looking forward to that. So I'm going to pass you over to Catherine. Thank you.
Thank you, Mel. And thank you all for joining, and welcome to our webinar on global payroll efficiency, how to improve your global payroll performance. So my name is Catherine Doyle, and I'm part of the CloudPay team. And today I'm joined by my colleagues, Marlene Felisberto and John Pierce. Now, John Pierce is our Senior Vice President of Payroll Operations, and he is responsible for CloudPay's global payroll services, leading an operations function that spans 11 service centers, running payroll for over 2,000 global entities in over 130 countries. He also supports customers that want to transform the way that they do global payroll, payments, and the employee experience. Now, Marlene Felisberto is our Senior Director of Global Consulting Solutions, and she leads CloudPay's solution consulting practice, helping companies realize the value of a unified payroll process and identifying and applying resolutions to customers' payroll processing challenges. Now, as we go through the webinar today, please feel free to add any questions that you might have into the Q&A section so that we could answer them at the end. So let's quickly run through the agenda. We'll start by taking a look at what the PEI report is and why it's so important. What metrics do we analyze? How do we measure them? And then John will lead us through our headline story for the latest report, featuring how the cost of living crisis and the war for talent is affecting payroll efficiency. We'll discuss why standard SLAs just aren't enough and why we need those key KPIs to see the full picture of how a payroll function is working. We'll also discover which countries are the most efficient at doing payroll and which are the most improved compared to last year. Marlene will then take a deep dive into the numbers at a global and regional level before we wrap up with our recommended next steps. Also, be sure to stay tuned as we will have an exclusive link for you to download the PEI report at the end of this webinar. So what is the Global Payroll Efficiency Index report? The Global PEI report sets a new standard for payroll efficiency. It's an industry benchmarking report of payroll processing KPIs across more than 130 countries. And now in its 4th edition, this report seeks to identify and measure the efficiency metrics that make a difference to payroll performance, allowing us to monitor performance across every country and enable continuous process improvement. These metrics include first-time approvals, data input issues, issues per 1,000 payslips, calendar length, and supplemental impact. For a bit of context, the data in this report is sampled from more than 1 million payslips generated between January 1st and December 31st of 2022. And this is from multinational entities across the Americas, EMEA, and APAC regions. So at this point, I am going to hand it over to John, who will take us through the first 4 points on the agenda.
Thank you, Catherine. And to kind of set us up for today, I just want to bring in some kind of external factors that we're hearing a lot about when we're talking with our payroll customers and with other people in our industry, and how right now everybody's kind of experiencing this cost of living crisis, and we're still also suffering a little bit in the war for talent. So employers are trying to find ways to support their employees through this cost of living crisis, but they're also having to compete to attract and retain those employees, as there's still a lot of competition out there. So one of the ways we're seeing customers trying to do this is to use innovation in their payroll to find ways to improve, to have a positive impact on the employee pay experience, helping them to attract the top talent into their company and helping them to retain that talent. And when we talk about improving the employee pay experience, we're talking about new products such as earned wage access. We're talking about mobile delivery of services such as pay slips. We're also talking about ensuring you have late cutoff dates so those employees always get as much overtime. Sorry, let me just clear that into their pay packet as normally. They don't have to wait for the next period to receive things. So all of these efficiencies that can be driven through the payroll team can actually now start to make a big difference to companies. So cost of living crisis and the war for talent, we're starting to see more use of innovation, but what's this really got to do with payroll efficiency? If you want your payroll team to be able to deploy these new technologies and these new solutions to really make a strategic benefit to your company by helping them tackle these challenges, then firstly, you need to help your payroll teams find ways to have more efficient payroll process and service delivery so that they can have some time to focus on these more strategic problems. Right now, and we're seeing this in a lot of our customer base, and it's something the GPA are focused on right now, is we are starving for a lack of new talent coming in to global payroll. So we need to do things to make it more attractive. And having the time to work on these new products and to improve the life of our payroll teams, but also have time to add value to our business is something that we can all work towards. So making our payroll processes more efficient will allow us time to focus on these other areas. All right, Catherine. So we're going to do a bit of a recap for those that are new to maybe the KPIs that we're specifically going to talk about today. At CloudPay, we understand that SLAs are very, very important. You need to have a contractual commercial relationship when you're outsourcing your payroll to ensure whoever you're using as your provider is doing their very most to ensure your employees are paid accurately and timely. However, we do believe that just relying on SLAs aren't enough if you really want to optimize. And to quote a phrase I've stolen from someone long ago is, if your SLAs are green, your payroll team might still feel red. And that points to, although you've managed to get to the right result in the end and get the SLAs green, you may have had a lot of pain to get there. And that pain generally comes through problems with the payroll process. So the 5 KPIs that we measure at CloudPay and that we spend our time looking at are below. So I'm going to go through them. First time approval. So this is kind of the catch-all #1 KPI to tell you if you've got a super efficient payroll process. It focuses on every time that we give the payroll back from processing it to when the customer sees or the payroll team sees the results. Are they able to review and approve that payroll first time without needing to send it back for any rework? If you can approve the payroll first time, it indicates a pretty strong process and your team doesn't have any extra rework to revalidate, resubmit data, all of those extra things that can be caused by a rejection of a payroll run. The second KPI that we believe is important to understand is the amount of data input issues. How we measure that is the total of all errors that we capture during the process, what percentage of those errors are related to the data input issue, and then we can look at how do we clean up that data input issue so we drive cleaner payroll processing. The third KPI that we're very interested in is issues per 1,000 pay slips. So this could be any issue that's reported during the end-to-end process. How many of them do we typically see per 1,000 payslips produced? Also, it's a very good indicator of a clean process, a clean configuration, and a clean calculation. Calendar length is also very important. all businesses wish to have as long as possible to get as much data into the payroll calculation as possible. But they also are very wary to leave too short a time that you can't have the proper processing and quality controls around that. So it's always a very fine balance to balance the needs of the calendar length from the wider business and giving yourself sufficient time to adhere to your SLAs. And the final one we look at and study is the supplemental impact or off cycles. So every time you need to run a sup run or an off cycle run, and if we forget about some countries where it's kind of required and you can't escape it, but we kind of look at the ones where it could be avoided, because a sup run for the customer often implies additional cost and work, and for the supplier or the provider of services, it's typically an unplanned event that they somehow have to staff and plan for with short notice. So trying to figure out where we're seeing those off-cycle runs and how can we avoid them in the future by changing parts of the process can lead to a really good business benefit for those customers. All right, so I'm going to hand over to Mel, and we're going to have a quick poll, I believe.
Yes, we are. So the question is, let me launch it. Which country keeps getting more difficult? United States, United Kingdom, China, Argentina, France, or other? And I think if you guys are happy with it, if you want to put in the country that you've got for other in chat, it would be
that'd be great.
Yeah, good to see. So if you're happy to just put in chat what the other country is. Guys, what do you think is going to be the hardest country here?
I'm gonna say I'm leaning towards China or Argentina.
Okay.
You can't pick Argentina. That's mine, John.
Okay. Yeah, there's certainly China keeps on changing things around the compliancy side of stuff that's making it very difficult for those in global payroll to keep their arms around. So I think that's
okay. So I've seen a few pop up on chat as well. So we've got some different countries there. Italy's come up a few times, and India.
Yes.
Yeah.
Italy, I think
Mexico's made the list.
Strong contender as well.
Yeah. So whoever's put France on, you can add France on your poll if you haven't. Just to, I'm getting anal now, aren't I, about that?
Use the poll correctly.
Yeah, sorry. Okay, right. So, I mean, fantastic response. Thank you, everyone who's adding to chat as well. We've got over our 70%. So I will end the poll and I will share the results now. So we've got United States 23%, UK 13%, China 16%, Argentina 5%, France 32%, and other 11%. So we've got the countries there in chat, but it looks like France is a winner there.
So I managed to pick the least voted for. Good for me. Okay, wow, it's good. Everybody's always got opinion on which country is the most difficult for payroll. So it's great to see so many chats coming in. Do you want to move us along, Catherine? All right, so now we're going to look into our data and see a little bit about what the data tells us which countries are now becoming the most efficient at doing payroll. And for this metric, we'll relying on the KPI first time approval. So the Payroll Efficiency metric, which country approves the payroll first time the most often? If you look there at China, having a crazy score of nearly 96%, 96 out of 100 payrolls in China are being approved first time, really speaks to some great process, even though, you know, quite a few of us thought it was a particularly challenging country to deliver payroll in. That's actually, it's moved up to first place, and its score is the second highest in the report's history after Panama recorded a massive 96.5% in 2019. So there is your big PEI historical fact for today. Also great to see a number of the LATAM countries sneaking in there, a region that a lot of people would say is one of the toughest to deliver payroll. We've got Brazil, Chile, Bolivia, Argentina, all in there, scoring amazingly well on first time approval. Perhaps that is because they do have a lot of maybe smaller headcount off cycle sup runs, lets them creep up that metric some, but still a great achievement. All right, well, let's have another little look at some data. So we thought it would be interesting to see which countries have had a remarkable improvement in efficiency from last report to this report. So again, we're looking at the metric of first time approval. So Paraguay have jumped a massive 20% from this time to from last time to this time. So 20 more payrolls out of every 100 are being approved in Paraguay first time than they were previous years. And again, we can see some of the more, let's say, exotic long tail countries starting to get some traction. You can see Bolivia, Jersey, Guernsey all coming into the action, tending to have lower headcounts than some of your more core countries, but still great to see they're progressing with their efficiency journey. Okay. So I think I'm handing over now. I'm talking about difficulty. So we've had our own go at assessing difficulty, and we're going to show you a little bit about how we think about KPI payroll difficulty. So when we talk about the poll and we asked you which countries did you find most difficult, well, we've also ranked them with a panel of global payroll experts. We've had a go at producing our own scale for this metric, and we'll show you what we came up with in the next few slides. But it's judged on three main themes. Firstly, and most importantly, payroll complexity. Does this payroll often have multiple frequencies? Does this payroll have significant requirements from the government? Does it need a lot of extra information to make a calculation for the tax or to prepare a tax submission form? All of these kind of things that people talk about around payroll complexities are our first item that we assessed. We also then thought about what software is available to help you process that payroll in a country. And if you think about it, in a country of the same complexity level, if you've got absolutely wonderful software, it's going to be a lot easier to process than a country of the same complexity that has very poor software, which can make it either harder or less harder to process. The third thing we considered was the availability of payroll talent, something I'm sure all the people on the call have suffered with from one time to another. And this is from the perspective of being able to work in a global enterprise business. So often the payroll team would need to speak English as a second language, and they're working in this kind of environment. So where is it easy to hire people to support your payroll, and where is it perhaps more challenging? So we moshed all of those scores together, and we came out with some rankings that we are going to share with you now. And I'm now anticipating the barrage on chat to tell me that we're all incredibly wrong, but let's see if some of you agree with us at all, or if some of you got some of your own ideas. And again, this is just our opinion, and we're super interested to hear what you guys say. So let me just orientate you a little bit on this slide. So countries further to the right, they have been judged to be more difficult in terms of their just complexity, or their software is not great, or it's really hard to find good payroll people in those countries to work on the payrolls for you. in this view, we're going to layer over how efficient they are, or how good they are at getting first-time approval, to kind of give us an idea of where is it really hard to do payroll, but somehow it's being delivered very effectively, compared to where is it less hard and perhaps not being delivered so effectively. So ideally, in this kind of matrix, you want to be as high up the chart as you can. That means you're doing effective, you're delivering well. So if I call out a few things, and you know, this is where I get worried. So our score is showing the UK, Philippines, and the US and India as being relatively less difficult than some other countries, but also relatively inefficient. So I think I try and explain this so I don't upset every UK payroller on the call, that the drop in efficiency here is not oh, I've just got chat appearing all over my screen. It's not considering the size of headcount. So typically global companies, global organizations will tend to have higher headcounts in the UK, in the Philippines, in India, in the US than, let's say, they would have in Switzerland or Israel in general. But I think everybody would appreciate the fact that the higher the headcount on the payroll, if you've got 1,000 people on the payroll, you're less likely to be able to prove it first time than if you've just got one. So I think that dynamic is kind of making the US, UK, Philippines look like they're having a bit of poor performance on the efficiency. But we'll see another view in a minute that kind of helps balance that. But we can see that China, Japan, Brazil doing very well, considering the difficulty they've been assigned to still deliver a very effective payroll service. So let's have a look at that second view, Catherine, please. Okay, so similar concept to last time. The further to the right your country appears, the more difficult we have assessed that country to be in terms of delivering payroll service. This time we're lining it up against issues per 1,000 payslips produced. So how many issues are creeping into that payroll for every 1,000? So this balances that head count, that size of payroll that was kind of missing from that first score. And again, you want to be as high up the graph as you can, so having less issues per 1,000 payslips, and that will give you some good insight. So coming back to Philippines and the United States, they have jumped up from being looking up to be performing poorly last time, but now we're considering the general size of the payrolls that are processing in these countries. You can see they're actually doing wonderfully well in terms of not generating many issues. Oh, hello. And China still maintaining a strong score. Brazil still doing very well. And there we go. Now, unfortunately, Norway and Denmark, so it's Nordics now suffering from generating issues. Quite challenging are the Nordic payrolls. So they are showing up as being quite difficult, but we'll see they're performing, let's say, the least well in terms of issues. All right, Catherine. So I hope you've enjoyed looking at our attempts to consider which countries are more difficult and how they line up when you start applying some performance data to them. And I can see we've got a swirling circle of doom on the screen. So before I hand over to Marlene, who's going to give you some of the more detailed insights around payroll efficiency, I think we can talk about when you have access to these metrics about first-time approval, about issues 1,000. It's all great having that data, but what's super important is being able to look into that data at detailed level. These kind of KPIs allow you to call out focus areas And then what we recommend at CloudPay is for you and your payroll team to deep dive root cause analysis where those analytics are pointing you to try and find areas for opportunity. And Catherine, how are we doing with the slides?
It's coming right back up, but I think that we can actually jump into our second poll of which of the 5 KPIs.
Okay. So if you want me to present the slides from here, if you're having problems, let me know, okay?
I think I've got it right back up. I'm going to try to share it again.
Okay, so while that's happening, is everyone ready? We're going to launch the next poll. So the question is, which of the 5 KPIs do you think is the most important? First time approvals, data input issues, issues per 1,000 payslips, calendar length, supplemental impact. Guys, what do you reckon on this one?
I want to answer this one first, John. I'm gonna go with first time approvals.
Okay, I'm gonna go issues per 1,000 because I think it helps to adjust some of the headcount challenges that make us poor UK and US payrollers look very bad.
And if anybody has any other ideas, they can put it in chat as well. So we're using the chat quite a lot today, so it'd be good to hear any other views. But thank you so much for everyone to answer the polls. You're doing a fantastic job. Normally I have to really beg and everyone's answering them today. So thank you so much. So we finishing it shortly. So everyone ready? So I'll end the poll and show the answers. Okay. So we have first time approvals 23%, data input issues 44%, issues per 1,000 payslips 29%, calendar length 2%, supplemental impact 1%. Can I just say I thought calendar length might be higher on that, but anyway.
Right.
Okay, what you thought then? So shall I stop sharing?
Is Catherine ready for you?
Oh, yes.
Okay.
So let's do it.
All right, so now it's time for a little bit of competition, and we're going to compare some of the results in the 5 KPIs that John walked through a little bit earlier, but we're going to compare the results from the 2021 report to the 2022 report. So there's a lot of interesting activity that actually happened in last year's report. So the first time approval rates are down by 0.87%. That is the first time in the history of this report that the global first time approval rate has dropped compared to what we've seen in previous reports, albeit it's only, a relatively small amount. But the drop, we've been able to narrow that down, has been driven by entirely by a sharp fall of 2% in the EMEA region, which is significantly larger drop than what we had experienced in the prior year. That was only 0.78%. So there are certain countries in the EMEA region where we saw considerable declines in the performance, countries such as Lithuania, Bahrain, Slovenia, and Saudi Arabia. While the Americas saw another decline, but it was really marginal of 0.21%, and the APAC region rate stabilized with a 0.08% improvement after a huge gain from the prior year of 5.63%. Okay. The supplemental impact has increased by 0.07%. So the rate of the supplemental impact has swayed over the recent years, I think, depending on what's happening throughout the world. So we saw an increase of 4.2% in 2020 as the pandemic took hold. There was a that was tempered by 2.3 reduction in 2021. But just to demonstrate how things have calmed down since the events of COVID and the Great Resignation, the 2022 results are almost identical to the previous year. So we just saw a 0.07 increase, bringing that to that 17.23%. The issues per 1,000 payslip are up by 15.78. So after a surprise increase last year, the global rate of issues per 1,000 payslips has reduced to the 8.64%. That's the lowest rate that we've ever recorded in this report. So we have two first record-breaking items here for 2022. This was mostly driven by another large reduction in the EMEA region, coming down by 3.44%. And then we also saw recorded results dropping. So, but the biggest one was down in the EMEA compared to what we've seen in the prior years. So the next one is the data input issues are down as well. So to make up for the global top 5 that has changed substantially. Last year, when we went through some of this report, we had called out some specific countries that were on the top 5 of data input issues. This year, we're seeing again something a little bit that's changing. So New Zealand still remains on that top 5 list. It is now holding the 4th spot for the year. But last year's top 3 of Hungary, Bulgaria, and Peru have now fallen out of that top 5 altogether. This is a bit surprising since Hungary was first last year and second on the year before. And then we have the calendar length, and this one has decreased by 0.37 days, which that's a change for us as well. After the 2 consecutive years of increasing, the global calendar length has fallen in 2022, again, by 0.37 days. That's still, a huge increase. So as we think about these things, regionally, the results have completely flipped. EMEA has recorded a 0.2 day decrease, whereas it had increased last year, while APAC has increased after posting a decrease in 2021. So, different things happening in different regions, but the calendar length is an area where the integration of payroll with other platforms, particularly from a data perspective. So a lot of folks, on the chat had data input issues and things like that as that number 1 cause. This can make a big difference. So if we're going to use EMEA as an example, its calendar length it's been shortened at the same time that the issues per 1,000 payslips has substantially reduced. So we're starting to see a connection between these things. So normally, a shorter calendar length may lead to an increase in issues because the payroll is being rushed and not properly checked, but the technology has really changed the dynamic in these areas. All right, so now we're going to look at specific regional breakouts. We are going to start with the KPI analysis for the Americas region. One that's always very near and dear to my heart. So on here, you can see where these levels have increased and or potentially decreased. I will call out a few. So for the impressive 10.2% reduction of data input issues for the America is one of the standout results for this year's report. However, the region's reports across the other metrics were not as impressive or exciting. The first-time approval rate did decrease in the region. The calendar length has increased, and the issues per the 1,000 payslips has increased as well for the first time this year, and that increased by that 1.22. Furthermore, the supplemental impact rates have risen to the point that they're now more than double of the other two regions, and driven by an extremely high rates, all of it being in the Latin America region. So we know that in that region specifically, a lot of payroll events have to be done in those supplemental cycles, and that's clearly just absolutely picking up more and more as we present this report year over year. So overall, unfortunately, this means that the Americas is not the strongest performing region of the three, despite its notable data input issues results. But this is likely due to shorter payroll frequencies in many of the countries, leading to some of those rush processes, less extensive validations, and more errors kind of getting through. So that's definitely an area of focus as we continue to analyze this data. Okay, as we move to our next region, we're going to go ahead and just look at what happened in EMEA over the course of 2022. So the biggest improvement for EMEA was the issues per 1,000 payslip, which declined by the 3.44. And that's allowed the region to overtake the Americas on this metric, while the calendar length decreased by the 0.2 days. The overall figure is still the longest amongst the three different regions. There was a decline in the first-time approval rates in EMEA. So this has also continued, falling by another 2%, bringing that to 69.1%. So although the data input issue rates have once again decreased by a 1.8 drop, it was lower than it had been posted in previous years, and lower than the other two regions is what they were able to achieve this year. So the EMEA's region's results, not what we were expecting, I think, overall, but should be taken as a pinch of salt, given some of the extenuating circumstances that we've seen, happen throughout 2022. Okay. And we are now going to go to our final region, and we're going to talk a little bit about Asia-Pac. So in general, APAC is the best performing region out of the three, despite the fact that its overall performance is actually worse than what we saw in 2021. For example, APAC was the only region to post an increase in first-time approval rates this year. However, at a 0.08, it was a tiny improvement compared to the 5.63 increase that we saw posted 12 months previously, so in last year's report. It still lags at 4.66% behind the American in total. Most positively, the decrease of 2.5 in the data input issues entirely wiped out the 2.7 increase from last year, which the region continues to have the lowest number of issues per 1,000 payslips, while the calendar length increased and the supplemental impact decreased. Both of these changes are very, very small compared to what we've seen in 2021. Okay. And I will go ahead and hand it back over to the lovely John.
Thank you, Marlene. So I hope you've enjoyed kind of our look and our thoughts about which countries are the most difficult to do payroll in. I've saw some great chats there about everybody else's opinion, so that was fantastic. I guess the takeaway that we'd like to kind of share from what we're seeing and what we're experiencing with our customers and from our payroll delivery is it really remains super critical to understand and measure a set of KPIs around the payroll service, so that you as a payroller can understand which countries are performing better than others, and track over time how those are changing, so that you can take actions in a continuous improvement mindset and really measure them against data and see the results in the KPIs. And that should drive you towards having a more efficient payroll process wherever you're operating. So really taking the time to, maybe if you have your own KPIs, not necessarily ours, but any kind of KPIs that really allow you to measure efficiency, I think is very valuable. And we believe at CloudPay that if you can continually work on improving your payroll efficiency, you'll be able to be better equipped for all the pressure you get as payrollers of always being asked to do more for less, but also that you'll have time to work on some more strategic initiatives that can really add strategic value to your company, things that can improve the positive experience of pay for your employees, and things that allow you to give analytical insight to the rest of the business to help them make better decisions. So being able to integrate and to automate and having the time to innovate, we believe, is very important in achieving a modern pay experience for the companies that you represent and for your employees.
All right. So thank you, John, and thank you, Marlene. So now for all of you wondering, our Global Payroll Efficiency Index report is now available to download on our site. So please feel free to scan this QR code up on the screen with your phone, or you can visit the link shown here. I'll also just add this link to the chat so that everyone can access it with ease. And Mel, I may ask you if you're able to add that in there, because I don't know if that was shared with everyone.
Yeah, I'll just add it to everyone now, so everyone should get it.
All right, and we will leave this up on the screen so you have plenty of time to scan or grab that URL. But with that, let's jump into some of the great questions we've been seeing pop up throughout the webinar. All right, so it looks like for our first question, how can we join up payroll and payments to make payroll processes more efficient? Who'd like to take this one?
Oh, well, I will have first go. I think it's a great question. Firstly, to the employee, to the end user, the way they experience their relationship with the payroll department is by receiving their payroll accurately and timely into their bank account, allowing them to do all the things that they kind of expected to. So being able to ensure that doing a great payroll calculation and executing a great payment of that net pay instruction to the employee, I think it is highly important. There's no point doing one well without doing the other well. So I think they're of equal importance, and I think by having a process that allows you to leverage technology to deliver that end-to-end process can be very efficient for the organization, and it can help ensure a greater experience for the employees. And I think there's a lot of new technology coming around that allow organizations to deploy end-to-end solutions that include both payroll and the delivery of the payment to the end employee.
All right, got another question here. So I know we talked about the most efficient country and the most improved, but it looks like everyone is curious. What country do John or Marlene feel to be the most difficult, and why?
Marlene first.
For me, so you guys heard me earlier, Americas is a near and dear to my heart. I feel the most difficult is also my favorite, and that one would be Brazil. I like the challenges it brings. Over the last couple of years, there were a lot of changes happening with e-social and just changing the mindset and the way that we've traditionally worked with payroll. So for me, that's the things that kind of keep me going. So I will always pick Brazil every single time.
All right, and I'm gonna stick with China from my earlier answer, and I think that's generally around the compliance, data privacy challenges that we have representing our global customers and delivering services in China. I'm also going to add an old classic that most people will be able to relate to, which is France. Again, it's super complex with the collective agreements, but also I'm certainly hearing from customers that it's becoming increasingly challenging to find French payroll staff as well. So it's now getting a double whammy of being really hard, and there's just not enough experienced French payroll staff to support it, which is making it even more difficult to deliver a successful performance.
But if you had to just pick one, John.
If I had to just pick one, I'm going to go China.
All right, fair enough. Okay, so next question we have is, what newer technologies are coming in that will help improve payroll efficiencies?
I think I'm going to go first. I think there's a lot of kind of next generation, second generation integration technology that's coming about. I think a lot of global HCM platforms are able to integrate into a lot of payroll platforms, but I believe those integrations are now being enhanced by product teams on both sides to make them even more efficient and really deliver the benefits. And I think in some of the data we saw a decreasing in the amount of total errors and a decrease in the amount of errors being caused by data input. And data input always drives the biggest amount of errors in any payroll process. So anything that you can do to optimize around that is going to have huge benefits for the rest of the process. So I think the data showing that those integrations are really starting to deliver some results that the organizations were expecting when they put them in. And we're seeing some of the top HCM providers releasing second generation integration stack that are great enhancements. So I believe adopting those integrations is a great benefit for the payroll world. Marlene?
No, I think you covered it, John. The integration is key. I think some of the changes that, at least from what I'm seeing, I'm very happy to see happening within our organization, is removing, more automating things and having different triggers, right? So general ledger is a great example of that. That can be triggered off as soon as that payroll is signed off on, right? So removing some of that, having to think of sending this piece off and putting in some triggers in the systems, having the good quality up front allows us to be able to do some of this stuff on the back end. So I think it's all connected.
And then the other thing technology that I'm really excited to see where we go, although I don't think we're quite there yet. I haven't seen it working amazingly well, but I think the AI chatbot experience, how can we maximize and leverage that new technology? And perhaps that's around answering payroll queries, teaching it how to read pay slips and answer, and kind of provide some real instant responses to employees that have queries. Might be a kind of place where we could start looking at that technology. I think certainly it's going to be a while before it's played out, but I think it's a great place that's really exciting for us to keep our eyes on.
All right.
Although not everybody agrees with me, according to the chat. Which is fine. Any other questions we'd like to tackle?
Yes. So for this one, we did kind of talk about it, but maybe if there's anything more to the subject that we want to add. So the question is, how will the cost of living increase affect payroll efficiency for 2023?
That's a big question. I think if we consider what the impact it is, I think it means employees, so the end users, are going to be even more affected, impacted if we have bad payroll efficiency that results in them having late or incorrect payments. So I think that kind of says there's more, even more pressure on the payroll team to deliver that accurate payroll, that timely payroll to the employee, so they don't suffer even more from the cost of living crisis. So I think that's kind of the key thing for me. So I'm expecting, well, I don't know, am I expecting the overall efficiency to improve? I'm hoping that some of the new technology that customers payroll teams are introducing will help drive up the efficiency and help minimize that impact.
All right. So we have another one right here. So I know we touched on this KPI of first time approvals, but wondering if we can define it a bit further.
I will try my hardest. So we get the payroll inputs are collected from all of those various sources. They're put into the payroll calculation engine. The engine runs all its calculations and produces some results, some sets of pay slips. We then look at those results and those sets of pay slips. And the first time we see them coming out of the system, we go, yep, that's good. Good to go. We don't need to do anything else. We can't spot any data deficiencies that come in. We can't spot any issues with the calculations that have been managed. We can't see any problems that are going to make us go back and rerun this calculation one more time. We're happy to go with it first time. If you go with it first time, it means you're not going to be under time pressure to hit that payroll sign off because you're going to sign it off. So that's good. Your payroll team is going to feel more relaxed. It also is a great indication that all of the upstream processes where you collect that input data from are working well. It also is a good indication that the configuration and the software that you're using to perform that calculation is working well. And it's also a good indication that the team you have supporting and processing that payroll and know what they're doing or are doing it well. And if you're scoring 90% on first time approval, that means 9 out of 10 payroll runs, you are achieving that first time approval. I hope I've explained that in a way that makes sense to everybody.
I think so. That was pretty in depth. Let's see, we have another one here, and this is for both John and Marlene. Any top tips for improving payroll efficiency?
Yes, I think my top tip is to define your own set of KPIs that you can measure consistently across and well, ideally coming straight out of a system, so they're not subjective. Which is our first time approval comes straight out of the system. Then you can start tracking performance and get a good understanding of what that performance looks like, and then you can root cause analysis. What's causing the issues? You can take actions to try and solve those issues, and then as you continue to track, you can see if the actions you've taken have been successful. You're being proactive, you're tracking trends, you're using data to guide you in your decisions, and you're working with a mindset of continuous improvement. And that would be my top tip for everybody seeking to improve their payroll efficiency.
So you cheated a little bit earlier because you named 2 countries. I'm going to piggyback off of that, and I'm going to add to your answer. I think the way that we can improve efficiencies is, exactly what John just said, but also taking that data, understanding it, pinpointing where the issue is, and then going back and working with those business partners, right? Having that education go back if it's, data quality issues that you're seeing coming across from that HCM integration, if it's, things that we're seeing potentially coming out of the finance team, if it's bonuses or commissions or whatever it is. So leveraging the information that you're gathering, taking those facts, right? And then working with the different business partners to come together, clean that up. We're now back into those data input issues that we saw floating through the chat. We're minimizing those, making the payroll process more efficient, hopefully getting us to that first time approval and, those shorter calendar lengths. So everything that John just said, but I'm going to add that piece to it.
All right. Fantastic. Well, I think this is probably a good point to wrap up. And just want to thank John and Marlene again, and Mel for hosting us, and all of you who've joined today. I hope you enjoy downloading our new PEI report and get plenty out of it. And looking forward to seeing you next time around.
Thank you so much, guys. I really enjoyed it as always, and look forward to seeing you, as you said, next time around. So thanks.
Thanks, Mel.
Thanks, everyone.